Listening there to French President Macron saying he has no regrets. He wants pension reform implemented by the end of the year. That, of course, includes changing the retirement age from 62 to 64. Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne is staying put. No government reshuffle. In fact, the president says he has confidence in her and that she has a mandate to enlarge a majority. I want to bring in our French politics editor, Marc Perelman. Marc, what did you make of what Macron had to say? He seemed quite defiant here.
Yes, this is typical. Emmanuel Macron, clearly, he likes to engage, to debate, to fight, rhetorically, obviously. As you said, he is standing his ground. He said this reform, pending review by the Constitutional Court, will be implemented. He said by the end of this year. The plan was September 1st, so there might be a bit of a delay, but clearly he's not backing down. He is saying, this is something that we need to do. He asked rhetorically, do you think it makes me happy to do this reform? Absolutely not. But we need it. And my only regret is that we, it's including him, but also his government, haven't been able to explain why this is needed, why this is a constraint, why the system as we know it will go bankrupt or will go into a huge deficit if we continue to have the system without reforming it. And he also said that the unions have not proposed any compromise. Some of the unions will not like this. They said, no, it's the government actually that did not open the door. But he urged them to re-engage, he used that word several times, to talk about changing maybe the revenues of the workers, especially those who are nearing retirement. He said, we need to discuss this. We need to give them more means. We need to make those who work and have a difficult job, physically difficult, a possibility to earn a better life or to change jobs. He said, we really need to sit down after all this is over, but obviously this is wishful thinking because, as we know, the unions have called for a big day of strikes and demonstration, and I can tell you they will not be happy with what they've heard because Emmanuel Macron has given no indication that he will not promulgate this bill and that he is aiming to go ahead and push forward.
Okay, and of course, we've been listening to this interview for the last half hour plus. We have a little clip from the beginning of this speech. Let's take a listen and we'll talk more to Marc here on the other side.
For things to fall into place so that between now and the end of the year, for some 2 million, 1.8 million of our fellow citizens and see their pensions beginning to rise on average, 800 euros on average. For these 1.8, that we shift the retirement age by 3 months per year. We increase the number of trimesters to have to work for 43 years. It must come into force before the end of the year, but we have to wait on the court's decision.
So there he is once again trying to explain to the French public why this reform is necessary. Is he making a convincing argument? Is this resonating at all with the French public?
Well, it's maybe too late, and he acknowledged it in a way because he said we haven't been able to explain. He criticized the opposition, saying those who claim that this is not necessary, they're essentially choosing to have a bigger deficit, more debt, and that will be passed over to the next generations. He says, I'd rather have short-term unpopularity in the polls and serve the long-term interests. He said, I'm ready to be in that position. Well, he is actually in that position. But all the other points that he's making say, we have to talk about the environment, about school, about health, about building more factories, make sure that the unemployment keeps coming down, is probably falling onto deaf ears in the streets of the unions, because the unions are saying, well, Emmanuel Macron is not listening. He already was forced to railroad this reform through a parliament. He barely, his prime minister, but it's him in the end, barely survived a no-confidence motion despite having a majority. So yes, Emmanuel Macron can claim there's no other majority, and he confirmed that he still have confidence in the prime minister. But clearly, this will not go down well with the unions, and so this is a gamble that Emmanuel Macron is taking. What he didn't really explain is why he chose to do this reform from the get-go in a rather unprepared way. He said, we need to do this. Yes, okay, you need to do this, but you could wait another 6 months or so on. Do it better. Try to engage some of the unions. He's saying, the unions refuse to engage us. Some of the more reformist unions, especially the CFDT, have said, we've tried time and time again to engage the government, but they've decided what they wanted to do. And the changes they made in parliament are only cosmetic change. It doesn't touch the heart of the reform, which is pushing the retirement age from 62 to 64. Obviously, Emmanuel Macron, he took out a graphic showing that in France, you retire at 62, whereas in most other European countries, it's much later. Obviously, the critics will say, well, the system is not exactly the same. But yes, Emmanuel Macron is in a difficult position. He said, I hear the anger, I hear the wrath of a lot of people. It's legitimate as long as it doesn't become violent. And he clearly drew the line between the protest organized by the unions. He said, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with those who are trying to use this with violent means. But obviously, the polls are probably going to show that Emmanuel Macron did not convince a lot of people. What he's hoping is that he'll be able to weather the storm, that the unions will get tired, people will get tired of striking and not being paid, that there might be some violence that might turn some people against the movement. And once the bill becomes law, people will say, okay, he might have won and let's turn a page. But again, this might be wishful thinking. The answer will probably be in the next few days and next few weeks, more on the streets of France than in the halls of parliament.
It's interesting to hear Macron say that he's ready to accept unpopularity over this pension reform.